this is one of my dogs. He's a camp dog from Cape York. And that is a big pile of rubbish. In fact, it's all ghost net and rope collected by Indigenous rangers from Cape York, from Marpoon in northern Australia. Several years ago, there is absolutely no way in the world I would have ever dreamt that I would be stitching dogs out of a ghost net. And I probably would have asked, what's a ghost net? So these nets started their life as shiny new fishing nets. The fish they caught would feed many families. But something happened, and somehow the nets were lost or abandoned at sea. And they probably floated for many, many years, carried on currents and tides. And they did just what they were designed to do, to fish. They probably, and they would have, entangled all sorts of marine creatures. And those creatures attracted more creatures, and on it went, ghost fishing. Over time, the ocean changed its character, and it collected other things too, like bones and barnacles and Taiwanese toothbrushes, the odd kid's toy, bits of driftwood, and struggling turtles until it finally found its way to the coast. Could have washed up in mangroves, might have lodged on a reef, or perhaps it washed up on a beach. A big tide could have picked it up and taken it back out to sea to start the process all over again. So ghost nets collect everything in their path. Rangers tell me that they'd never seen ghost nets on their coastlines 30 years ago. The tons of net, tons and tons of net being washed up on the coast was either being burnt or dumped. Ghost nets had reached an absolute point of crisis, and something had to be done. So in 2004, communities took action and gathered people from diverse backgrounds, and they formed an alliance of people. They referred to themselves as saltwater people working together. The group also founded the organisation known as Ghost Nets Australia. The group came up with a 6R action plan to remove the nets across northern Australian beaches and waters. 15,000 nets, over 15,000 nets have been removed to date, and the majority of nets were coming from Southeast Asia. Rescue any animals found alive in the nets. Turtles accounted for 80% of those animals. Record information about the net, the size of net, type of net, GPS locations, and all animals that were found in the nets that were alive or dead. Research to understand more about where the nets are coming from and how they're travelling, and also marine turtles, their movements. And raising awareness to get the message out there so that people understand what a big issue ghost nets are. And recycle. Because of the remote locations, recycling wasn't an option. So in 2008, I was invited to do a scoping study to gauge if it was viable to use ghost net in the communities where the net was a problem, to make art and craft. I visited lots of communities, and everywhere I went, people were really excited by the idea, so it had a lot of potential. I submitted my report and was appointed by Ghost Nets Australia to run their art project. I gathered artists and weavers from around Australia. Between us, we had a wide range of skills. We'd all worked in communities, and we're all up for the challenge of turning marine debris into art. The first workshop we did was in Arakoon. The other artists, Gina, Elaine and I, we had never made anything out of GhostNet, and we certainly weren't weavers. But we ended up getting some okay results working with the wonderful Arakoon weavers. They really embraced the material, and weaving was something in their culture that they like to pass on to younger people, the older weavers. And so it was a really social activity. The work was sort of lumpy and bumpy, which was quite different because the nets are really knotted. It was quite different to any other art that they make, any weaving that they make, because they usually make really delicate work. And at first they thought it was a bit strange, this ghost net, but they actually really, as the baskets grew, they were endeared by the material. We ran workshops across the Northern Territory, Cape York, and the Torres Strait. People were really enjoying working with the material, and they made all sorts of things, all different techniques. We wanted to encourage the transfer of techniques and skills already used by people in the community and apply that to GhostNet. So people loved making baskets, but as they experimented with the material, they also began to tell their own cultural stories and made sculptural works, but they told personal stories as well. As people started to make things, a bit of healthy competition started to break out between communities. One of the artists said to me, "That woman up there in that other community, she made a big basket. I'm going to make a really big basket." So things did. They got bigger, crazier and kookier, more delicate and more refined as people took on the challenge to turn GhostNet into art. Everyone started looking for ghost nets because when they began using the material, it gained value in their eyes. So when people were out in a boat or on the beach, they'd have a look out, they'd pick up bits of net or rope. Even kids on their push bikes would be looking around, go down to the dump, see if anyone's dumped any, look on the beach and bring back bits of net or rope for their auntie or grandma or whoever was making something. Yeah, so people were out looking for GhostNet. Everyone, everywhere, was looking for GhostNet to turn into art. So, yeah, people got into it. So they were using it and people started collecting, and rangers were telling us that their net piles were going down, that people in the communities were actually coming and grabbing stuff to make either practical things or art and craft. And we noticed like sometimes there'd be little friendly fights would break out for little bits of net and rope, and trades were sometimes made. When we first saw this big net pile in Marpoon, the other artists and I, we absolutely couldn't believe our eyes. I mean, we were just beside ourselves. But the rangers would roll their eyes and look at us and they just couldn't, they just thought we were totally insane. It was funny because they saw it as a big pile of ugly rubbish that killed things, but we saw it as colours and textures and an almost jewel-like substance that we could turn into wonderful things. And sometimes the rangers would join our workshops, and we noticed their attitudes changing as they started to get involved in their creations. And we always got a real kick out of that because we thought, if we can convert the rangers, we can convert anyone. We started exhibiting shortly after the first workshop. The work was very fresh and new, and it didn't look like any other Indigenous art that was around at the time. It had and appeal. And, people liked it. And they liked the story of it. It's Zoe to Jersey. She just makes wonderful birds. And Stan, her husband. And people started buying the art. It was picked up early on by private collectors and public institutions. People purchasing the art felt that they were contributing towards an environmental cause, as well as supporting those artists from remote Indigenous communities. And what a better conversation piece to have in your house. And GhostNet art really started to get around. It was getting around Australia. And it was that's in Sculpture by the Sea at Bondi Beach. And it was getting around the world. We also ran many workshops, public workshops at festivals and events. People handling the material actually felt that they were part of the project and they felt connected to the project. They either made things for themselves to take home or they'd work on a larger sculptural work. And at the same time, they'd learn and talk to the Indigenous artists about how ghost nets directly affect their community. And there's something uncanny about weaving, stitching and making that brings people together no matter who they are or where they're from. Collaboration has been a great way to raise public awareness and also to make large sculptural works. As they say, many hands make slight work, but work isn't really work if you're having a good time, is it? There's a real buzz in turning a negative into a positive, or taking rubbish and turning it into something of value. So we all feel like we've been a little transformed by this project. And we had a revelation. The more we shared, the more we learned. The more we collaborated, the bigger things got. The more we included people, the more people wanted to be included. We collected people. I've seen firsthand how art can change attitudes. And if we can change attitudes, surely we can change actions. Networking has taken on a new meaning for us. And as much as we would love the art material to run out, there is nothing more appealing than that new gleam in another person's eyes when they too have been affected by net fever. So, next time you're walking on a beach, have a look around for a little bit of net or rope and pick it up and look at it, because it contains a story. It's been places. And it might just be a little piece of artistic treasure waiting to be transformed. Isn't that right, Doc? Thanks.